since this sheet is mostly about bashing Litvaks, just one of our like gags that go on. So I saw in Rabbi Tzal Naor over there has a book about some Chagall paintings. You know Chagall. I used to have his Marc Chagall was a painter.
He's an artist, no?
Yeah, artist. I used to have his picture of a Jew here. I told my wife this it doesn't work in my new design. We should throw it out. Anyways, and he was like a very I don't know how you call it, like imaginative, very like what's that book? See, like a blue book. It says the Kabbalah of Relation.
Oh, this one.
You could look at one of his pictures and you see already that his paintings like they're fantasy. They're not realistic. They're not based on anything in the world. They're based on things that are in the imagination.
More abstract, I guess.
So, what?
More abstract?
Yeah, I don't know what it's called. Like impressionistic, fantasy, something.
Oh, this is odd.
Yeah, they're very odd. They're like not. Some of them are really odd, and some of them are
very odd.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you understand what I'm talking about? Yeah, bring the book. Yeah,
Oh.
So it says in this book, Rabbi Tzal quotes him saying that, and he was comparing himself to another painter that like more to the Zach, with more structure, and he said, so I'm a chassid and he's a mesnagit. The painter is also a chassidim and Litvaks. It's a chassidish painting, and that guy's a Litvak. So from here we see that it's very, very chassidish and Litvak is emotional for
Saying it.
like a style. So here's these chassidish and Litvak painting styles.
Uh-huh.
Now, like this. Now we're going to learn a little bit about choice. We're going to try. We hear about, I talked about free choice and free will and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have to continue a little bit. I'll tell you why. And
No such thing as free will.
I didn't say there's such a thing. I said it's not important. The kind of, there's a lot to talk about this, but let's talk a little bit. Let's clarify like 1 or 2 points. Should be more than enough. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So we discussed that why are we talking about free will entirely? No, sorry. Why are we talking about choice, not free will? Okay, why are we talking about choice to begin with? We're talking about it because choice is one of the things that makes what we are into something that we are responsible for. That is the really interesting paradox. I don't know if we said it this way in the last class. I said it at Barpak in this way. In other words, there's these two things. Okay, we could talk about actions, right? Just like actions, things that a person does. That's one thing. Like Litvaks, right? Litvaks only talk about actions, right? You read for example, I was reading. It's very interesting because, for example, I was reading the Rav Lutzato, Mesil Sisharim, and here there's a version with a dialogue in the beginning. Yeah, that you know that. Yeah, that black book. Yeah, the Vikuach.
I don't think I've read the Vikuach.
Rav Lutzato was a Renaissance guy, and he was after the Renaissance. Yeah. But in their times, it was fashionable to write dialogues in the manner of Plato and so on, not only to write treatises. And many of his books he wrote in both of these ways, in dialogue form.
Have you ever heard of this? I recently bought it in Judaica Plaza. It's called a dialogue. It's called Sichos al Ahava. You have it? No. I didn't even know he had a son.
Yeah, he was a son.
That's so weird. I tried. I didn't get very far.
But he was a lot more. He's a Platonist, kind of a Platonist.
I found the beginning a bit tedious, so I didn't get too far.
Probably the translation is not so nice also. It's hard to translate this kind of thing.
There's an English one.
Oh, there was an English?
I think there's a University of Toronto one.
They had a Hebrew one, I saw.
Yeah, I have the Hebrew one. It was done by Mechon Bialik or something.
Yeah, so it was a thing to do this dialogue form. And dialogue form is useful at least because it shows you what someone is really up against sometimes. Like who is trying to argue. Sometimes you write an article and it's not clear who you're fighting with. So in a dialogue, you need to have like an opponent.
The best dialogue I saw was Shadal's.
Okay. Yeah, that's also
because it's not just setting up straw men to be knocked down. It's a full-throated, emotional,
Yeah, the Michal's, how do you call it, his like partners in the dialogue, interlocutors are not very advanced usually. They're usually not very good representatives of the other Shitta. But in any case, if I was noticing there, and we have to do more reading of that because it's related to all the subjects that we're talking about. But like his big thing in the beginning, he's up against something someone he calls a Talmudist. It's like a Nigla person, a Litvak. And he tells the Litvak that he doesn't know there's knowledge, right? His like big thing, which is something we agree with very much, right? So, although we don't agree with the way Mr. Shem frames it. This is not a Mr. Shem bashing class either. We're not here to bash the Mr. Shem. I'm just trying to use him to illustrate a point. So what he's up against over there is very clearly someone who thinks that actions are enough. He's like, what do we have to do in life? Well, we have to do what the law says. And of course you have to have kavanah, but that's not like the major thing. The thing is actions. So it's an externalized version, or like we say sometimes, it's making people into machines, which are things that are judged by their products, not by what they are, but what they produce. You produce mitzvahs, you're a good guy. You produce a virus, you're a bad guy. That's actions, right? Now, actions for the most part are there. That's the theory of actions. Now, contrary to that, there's this theory of something more internal, right? Something we say what you're on the inside, things like that. And now that theory is something that needs a lot of explanation, a lot of differentiation within it. What do we really mean by being something on the inside? What you are, not only what you do. That's something very, I think, that's given to very many simplifications and many, like, a lot of nonsense that people say and believe based on that, right? So, as an example of clarifying that, we've done a lot of clarification on that point in our discussions of actions and character and midas, which is not something external. But and I think that there's both kind of mistakes. There's many kinds of mistakes in this. But to be very clear, when we talk about midas, right, having good midas, we are not talking about some actions, right? Because the whole point, to make this point very sharp, the whole point of being a good person in Aristotle world, the Rambam world, is that it's a good person is someone who doesn't necessarily do something different than a bad person who is self-controlled, right? That's the important.
A good person.
The important difference, right? There's good people and there's bad people who have self-control.
Sounds very Tanya. I remember when I
the Tanya.
Very Tanya.
Yes, I agree, and this is another thing. I think that the Tanya makes some of the mistakes that, at least from the Rambam's point of view, the Rambam, the Tanya agree very much that it's not enough to do the good things, and I think that's why the Tanya, just to be very clear.
Yeah, because he says that in Russia could be someone, or a Bainani could be a Tzaddik Gomer in actions-wise.
Exactly. So. I think that the Tanya brings this into very sharp relief with that statement. Although I think that what the Tanya calls at tzaddik, what he calls internal, is not the same thing as what we're calling alternative.
The Rambam, the beginning of Parakeh says,
yes,
no, just like this. Why does he compare the two though?
Yeah, because the Rambam, and we're going to get to Parakeh and discuss it at some point in the next 20 years. Parakeh is explicitly about this, but it's assumed.
But he says it goes hand in hand, Maisim and Midas.
Oh, you mean Parakeh?
Yeah, Parakeh. No, Parakeh and this.
I don't know Chazayas. We're learning from it, but no. Why do you say it goes hand in hand in Parakeh?
It says just like you have to be good at Midas and Deis, right?
No. I know what you mean. No. I see what you mean. I don't think that's what it means. That word, that line. But let's stay here. We'll get to that. You mean the Chacham Nivdal, yeah, I don't think. I think the second thing is also not also internal there. I'll explain. In other words, it's still midas. It's not mas. Of course, there's masim that go with the midas. But what he's trying to say about deis over there means opinions, not midas. Deis over there doesn't mean midas anymore. It changes meaning.
Oh, really?
I think. I'm left to read it inside. Wait, let me come back. In this sense, so yes, to be very clear, in this sense, the Tanya, and I think this is why the Tanya gets into this whole, and the Tanya, as a good Litvak, ties himself into knots by trying to explain this and working it out with the Gemaras and so on. And I'm pretty sure that the Tanya's Gemara is the wrong one for this subject. It's not. Tzaddik Gemara, of course, doesn't mean this ever. And maybe it means like that in the Ryan Hamlin, the Zohar that he quotes, another thing that needs to be researched, needed. But the Tanya is trying very hard to establish this thing, and like Chassidus, in in the very broad sense, right? In the very broad sense, Chassidus and Musar and Kabbalah and philosophy, they all agree with this statement that actions are not enough. They're not only they're enough, they're not the main thing. But how to spell this out, to spell out what it means, this internal thing, what does that consist of, that is something where people get very confused. And what I want to do today is to give some clarification of that based on the Rambam, based on Aristotle's understanding of this. I think that's the thing. So
it seems to me that today that it's a different motivation now, because today people don't have this sense of hierarchy in which that would motivate your actions. This is your responsibility, you go and do it. That people need inner motivation now.
Okay, so very good. So what people are looking for now is a different thing. Is really the thing is free will. It's not what we're talking about. Because wait, let's see if we can make this very clear without getting lost. So we're saying that it's agreed by. So wait, I was starting to talk about the Mesilas Yesharim and I didn't finish my sentence. So let's try to finish that sentence and then get to this one. Mesilas Yesharim, as an example, is very clearly against someone who will say that. But for example, he pretends that person is a scholar, and his opponent, Luzzato's opponent, is like a scholar who reads philosophy and science and so on. But of course, that scholar is a very bad scholar because he didn't read the ethics. And Luzzato is
he's saying that about his.
No, he doesn't say this. I'm saying this. He's telling him how his main point is how there is a wisdom. There is something to be studied in ethics. That's really Mesilas Yesharim's point in his Akdama, in both versions, but here you see it clearer in the dialogue. And because according to the opinion of the people who are into action, everyone agrees that they need some level of kavanah or some kind of internal, otherwise it's not you doing it and so on. But they think, that's simple, because that's basic. And then his description is like the Hasidim, and the Mesilas Yesharim talks about Hasidim. The Hasidim, the pious, the super pious people, who are busy all day purifying their internality, like the Litzak looks on them and says, you're wasting your time. What are you even talking about by all your Muslims? You're just repeating simple stuff over and over. And Luzzato is trying to answer that charge.
Well, then you have the Nefesh Chaim who says it's good stuff, but it's not ma'akev, it's not...
Right. So I think that I don't know very well what the Mesilas Yesharim thinks precisely about this. I have a feeling that he's, at least from my standpoint, also somewhat confused, but I can't really show it right now. But what I think is that we need to distinguish a whole bunch of things in this internal levels of things. So there's one thing that I already said many times.
Does Mesilas Yesharim put at the beginning action because it's like Zahiros, Zeriz?
Yes, but we have to. I don't know how we understand it.
Yeah.
I also think that he misunderstands Zahiros. There's a lot to talk. That we have to. I'm just using that as a way to talk about this thing. I was saying that his opponent that is not really a philosopher. He pretends we need Musar, you need whatever this story, Kabbalah, whatever it is exactly that he's putting in against that. It's not really true because the philosophers are the ones that invented this kind of internalism, and of course they don't. Aristotle at least doesn't understand it in the way that he understands it. I think there's a big difference here, which we have to get to. For example, one thing that we've talked about many times, maybe we'll be able to make it clearer today, is that internal, we say midah. So what does that mean to have a midah versus to just do the action, right? Someone can do the action, not by having it, not by being, right? Someone can, for example, act in a courageous way, do a courageous act, without being courageous, without having courage. And what will he be doing it by? He will be doing it by imitation, you could say. He will be doing it by some kind of spur of the moment decision. Remember that a habit, a character, a trait is something that's not spur of the moment, it's something settled. That has a more long term existence in a person. Or he can do it by self-control, right? Can say, I'm afraid. Well, it's not like the courageous person is not afraid, but we can get into that. But I don't really have this motivation, which courage is. But I somehow do have it, and we can talk about that separately because self-control is very complicated. But those are that's why maybe when we're talking about now, maybe self-control isn't the best place to split, although it's also split there, but it's more complicated. So we could say people acting, we could say, let's say now by imitation or by just like spur of the moment decisions, which doesn't mean that they're acting from that habit, from that character. He's not a courageous person. He did some courageous things in his life, or he did a courageous thing today. Maybe by doing that many times, he will become courageous like that, but he's not courageous yet, right? So that's the important distinction in the Rambam between the internal and the external. He doesn't call it internal and external. He just calls it having the midah and not having the midah. It's very important.
So he discounts that completely?
No, doesn't discount it completely. It's great.
Uh-huh.
It's just not a good person because the reason for this is obvious, right? Because, as he says, for example, nobody would call a good person someone who hates being good. Right?
This is a very Christian thing because like Christians say, like if you ask them like, how could someone go to hell if they were a righteous person? And you say, well, they could be internally wicked, you know.
So wait, I think that this is a different interpretation of that in some sense because because I think that's, I mean, what would it mean to be internally wicked although you're good? Like, I'm not sure.
What does that mean?
Maybe, I know
what... They always say that you have the potential to be wicked, even though, you know, that...
What does that mean?
That you're tainted by the original sin. Even if it looks like someone's righteous, they're not really righteous because they're tainted by original sin,
Okay, so then this would be something based off a similar way of thinking. But again, the question is, what does this really require? What does it mean to be internally righteous, like to be really righteous, right? Now, like I said, firstly, all it means is to like it, right? Or it's like have like a stable disposition to do it. Something like we say, like he's that kind of person, not he's a person that did it. There's the difference between colored people and people of color. Like something like that. No. So that's the thing. But so now there's one thing that we already did many times, which is to explain that these internal parts of this. So it's having a midah, having a character trait, having a virtue, right? Having a virtue. I'm going to call it a mala, which is the Arabic translation from Arabic. Having a virtue isn't equal to doing everything correct. It's something more than that. It's being that kind of person. But something very important to notice is that unlike an extreme internal version of this, that does not mean that the internal liking or the internal part of it is turned internally, right? So it's still about something, an action. Does this make sense? So, for example, we talked about the example of which example do we talk about? Like a midah that Hasidim like talk about another, right? Humility. Humility, and it's mentioned here in the list of midahs, humility. Humility for Aristotle and for the Rambam is a way of relating to other people. That means speaking to people with the appropriate level of how do you call it? Of being equal to them, or not putting yourself above them, not looking down at people in the appropriate amount. Because to some extent you need to match your station in life. If you're Shminis, there's all these discussions. What is the appropriate level? But like every midah, it's just in the appropriate amount, right? It's not like to be a shmata to everyone. That's not the idea. But that's a different discussion. What I'm trying to get at is that another humility is a other regarding midah. It's about how you act. It's about how you act, right? It's not about how you feel internally. Of course, now there is an internal part, but the internal part is not what I think of myself. It's how I like acting to other people. You get the difference? Like most people, when they talk about another, they think that it's totally internally focused midah. It's like what I think about myself when I sleep in my bed. Nobody cares. I mean, at least for middas. Middas are all other regarding. Besides for some, which are complicated, but in general, middas are all other regarding. In other words, they're all about actions. They're about how you like. Now, part of the difference between someone who has internal enough and someone who just acts the part is that the person who just acts the part doesn't like it, hurts them to some extent to be in an equal relationship with other people. It hurts them, or even below them.
But how do you like how do you like acting equal to people when you internally?
That's a question for you.
No, I'm saying, how's that?
Because you think that it's because you enjoy because you enjoy being people's friends.
But you still internally think you're above everyone else?
No, what does that even mean?
What?
What does above everyone else mean? I think it's a question of what I think or what I like to do. Someone can think that he's greater than everyone else and still hate walking into the shul and sitting in the front. Just because he doesn't like that activity, doesn't like that action. Understand? What you self-regard, what you think of yourself, that's a different discussion. It might be a different discussion. You should probably think of yourself accurately to what you really are. That's a different discussion. But another is not really related to that, because we all agree, at least to some extent, right? Moshe Rabbeinu was anav moed b'chol adam. It doesn't mean that he didn't realize that he was a great guy, like everyone asks. What it means is that he treated people with humility. He didn't, with respect, with, how do you call it? The opposite of like itnasut. How do you say in English? I forget my words.
Status?
No, he related to people in a, well, I don't know, more. There's a question of how much. Like, of course, I don't think Moshe Rabbeinu went to the bar with you, but he acted towards people, like Rashi says, shefel v'savla. He acted towards people in a way which is somewhat below what he really is.
Relatable?
Right? Yeah, to relate to people in a equal, right? He saw eye to eye. He spoke to them eye to eye. He didn't dispute, right? That's another. What I'm getting at here is that all midas are really external things in the sense that they're about other people. They're about how you act in the world. The internal part of them is just liking that. Like someone can enjoy, like someone who has the midah of humility is someone who enjoys being at the appropriate level of equality with other people in his social relations. He doesn't enjoy being above other people externally. And the person who doesn't have the midah enjoys the opposite, right? Someone has a bad midah, the person who likes being on top of everyone, or the person that's self-controlled likes being on top of everyone, but anyways overcomes it to act nice in a nicer way. That's the midah. That's the number one distinction, and this is a very important distinction because I don't think you will find, at least for these middas, there are some middas that are, maybe you could talk about middas between the person and God, or between midah like we discussed this over here, I think already, that even a midah like precious, temperance, which is what people would think is a midah, about how you relate to yourself, like how you, not to yourself, like to pleasure, is really about has a social function. So it's really about how you act. It's not really about how you feel. It's not about how much you like food. It's about you like eating in the appropriate amount, and so on. So it's at least an action, and even there's another level, but it's not our conversation now. What determines the correct amount of liking physical pleasures is what is conductive to society, and not what is. That's a different discussion. There's other levels of this, but that's the meaning over there. So that's one thing. That would be one important distinction. I don't know what the Tanya thinks. I don't know what Moshe Hashem thinks. All of these people, all these things are research needed. But what is important is that this internal version of internality is not a internally focused internality. It's still externally focused, because what the midah is the settled liking of the action. It's not something entirely disconnected from action. In other words, and what's the big difference is that it doesn't really make sense. It somewhat makes sense, but it doesn't make sense as much to say, I'm really a good person, but I don't act well. I end up fighting with everyone, but really I love them. Because what do you mean, why do you fight with them if you like not fighting? But you're saying I love them, you mean to say, you don't mean I love them in my heart, you mean I don't like fighting with them. And then you're just in a contradiction. Now that happens too, but then that's a real contradiction. It's different, right? So you'll notice, now I can go back to talk about what we call about internal conflict, right? Not being self-controlled, or in Greek akrasia, not being self-controlled, or in the Rambam's language, the Rambam only has a self-controlled person, but the opposite of that, not self-controlled person, then we can understand something interesting here, that this does not mean, this is the important thing, it does not mean acting not in sync with what I feel internally when it's self-focused, right? Like, for example, let's talk about something like the correct amount of loving your friends, of being good to your friends, right? Which is the midah of friendship. Friendship is very important midah. Right? Friendship. It's a mitzvah to be friends to other people. Very important. Much neglected. Now, the mitzvah of friendship, well, the activities of friendship, you know what they are. You hang out with them, and you help them, and you do business with them, and different levels of that, and so on. But what is the internal thing? It's being the kind of person who is a good friend, right? So we could say he likes. There's more to like than to liking. There's more to it than liking, as we'll get to today or next time. But at least liking. Now, sometimes people say, I love my friends, but somehow, every time I get together, we end up fighting. So I end up being a worse friend, right? I'm not. So some people talk about this as like a conflict, right? The Tanya's conflict, by the way, the Tanya doesn't talk about other human beings at all. That's one big difference in Tanya and every other Muslim book and so on. They're just focused on internal. The Tanya is only focused on between you and God. He's never focused on human beings. So it's a different discussion. But the Tanya's version of this is, I think, also similar to this in some sense. Because the Tanya says things like this: I love God internally, but I end up fighting with him all the time. Well, what does that mean? It's not the same. At least it doesn't. You see that by him, the internal thing, it means something different than what it means here. What it means here is to say that I have someone that would say, well, I love my friends. In other words, when I'm self-regarding, right, when I'm thinking to myself, I say, well, I like them. But then I'm not a friend to them. So you don't have the midah of friendship. You might have some other midah, I don't know, or some other, something else. But the midah of friendship is not something you have. Because the midah of friendship is the being a good friend, stably, somehow automatically, we could say, well, not a good word, but like being the kind of person who is a good friend. And not like having to look up your friendship book, like how to be friends. How's it called, the book? How to get friends. How to win friends. You don't have to look up that book every time you go out with your friends because you're already that kind of person, right? That's what having the virtue of friendship is. And now we could see that the conflict people often talk about is very similar to that weird person that would like, I like my friends, but I'm not a friend to them. That's not a conflict between the internal and the external. In the Rambam sense, that's a conflict between some fantasy you have or some other thing. We could find a word for it and what you really are. It's a different level conflict. Does that make sense? Clear? If there is a conflict, then now there is conflict like that. There are conflicts. There are people who would say, like, in some sense, I am a good friend, but I don't. Man, sometimes like someone say, well, I'm a good friend, but sometimes like I get mad easily, and then I don't act like a good friend. That would be a better example of someone having the real conflict, in which then you need self-control. Before that, you don't even need self-control, you need something else. You need to learn what the midah is at all. Or to start having it in some sense.
Saying he could be good at the midah, but some outside other midah is conflicting with that midah? Something like you forget, something like, well, of course part of the midah is not to get mad at it, at your friend. It's like another thing. It could be you could call it that way, but it just works. Like a good friend is not someone who gets mad at his friend all the time. In some sense, maybe, at least not too much. So you could say something like, well, yeah, like my anger problems are getting in the way of my friendship. So I am a friend, but I'm somehow not, it's not being actualized correctly. Now you have a problem. It's a different level problem. You understand the difference between these two versions of internality. Like, there's someone who just thinks that he likes his friends because when he thinks by himself that he likes them, but he doesn't actually have any internal virtue of friendship. That person for sure goes to hell, you understand? Because it's not like you have a bad, you get what I'm saying? You're really a bad person who fantasizes himself a good person. Like, this is actually something that happens. People like fantasize themselves better people because their fantasies are not about other people, are not about living in the world, are not about acting in the world, right? My fantasy is that I'm a big lamdan because, not a lamdan, like a masmid, right? Because something like I would have wanted to be the kind of guy that learns a lot or something like that. But I don't. That's not what you can't come and say, well, I'm internally a lamdan and just have like some external hindrance, something that's blocking me to actualize it. That's not what's going on. Because someone that's someone like who loves to actually learn, but sometimes he gets angry, sometimes he gets distracted. Then we can talk about that. But you're not someone that loves to learn. You love the idea of being that person. That's another level, right? Or my example of friendship would be even clearer. You understand what I'm saying? So this is important. So that's one important clarification. It's true that these midas are internal. Is there even a lower level than that?
There's lower levels than everything. You can always go lower. Never be messianish.
It's always worse. It could always be worse. And you cannot even have the fantasy.
Right, that's
obviously.
what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, it's very nice. But like what I'm getting at is this thing like people like to say, like every year has a good will. I don't think that's true in this sense.
Every year's a big tzaddik.
Every year is big tzaddik because he has a good rotzen, right? He wants to be good. That's very cute. Like you want to, like if it doesn't hurt me and if it wouldn't have any cost, and even then, not everyone. And if it doesn't mean anything, that's the important thing. It doesn't really mean anything, that fantasy. It's like a very far and fuzzy fantasy. That's not the same thing as being the kind of person the Rambam would say. When the Rambam says, you see, this is the funny thing, when the Rambam says the internal is important, right? He's focused on that. He's not talking about that. That's the important thing. I know the Rambam is Gerish and that all Siddish is sort of misused, but that's not a discussion for today. But the point is, that would not count as an internal midah for the Rambam's purposes at all. It would count as something separate from that.
Because there's a difference between like internal and is like the external will put you in good standing with society. You won't go to jail. You won't.
Mm-hmm.
But the internal will is a spiritual quality. You're freed from certain things that drive you crazy, that don't allow you to have that don't allow for a certain amount of spiritual clarity.
Right, but that's whatever you call spirit. That would be related to a whole different goal, like what you're calling spiritual clarity.
Yeah.
Where we're not up to that goal.
If you're bothered by an ego, that will take up a lot of bandwidth. Will take up a lot of.
Right, but why is it a problem? What is this spiritual clarity that you're looking for? What is that for? All right, I think it's a real thing, but it's a whole different level of discussion. So that's one thing. That's very important distinction here. I wanted to say something I forgot. Now there are other. Just to answer you more clearly, what we're talking about here is that even right, just the one I'm getting at, even the internal part we're talking about is still not for yourself. The Rambam would say this clearly in the last chapter.
It still affects the quality of how you treat others.
Yes. So we could say something, for example, like the clear version of something would be something like this. Someone who is I don't know how you call the correct middle with regard to others' money, right? Something like the opposite of a thief, right? Or someone, I don't remember what it's called. Something like, right? A honest person. This is complicated. A just person, a trustworthy person, right? Now, is like the Shaloi Lishma version, or the external version of that, which is like he doesn't like it, right? He's just afraid of going to jail, right? Mm-hmm. That would be someone who does everything correctly, like we call in Sfar Miras Ha'onish. Does everything correctly. He's trustworthy as long as the police is looking. Yeah. But since many situations the police are not looking, or it's hard, it's right? Right? When there's something and social circumstances have many such circumstances. Mm-hmm. It's not really true that society can only care about the level of Yiras Ha'onish, because we do need, for social purposes, we also need good people who have like what we call a moral backbone, right? They have to be really good, and that means he likes being trustworthy for its own sake, right? He thinks that it's good for him, and he's the trustworthy person, not he's an untrustworthy person who is acts within the bounds of society, he doesn't want to go to jail, and so on. He's a really good person, and that's the kind of internality that is needed for social to work, right? We don't really want the world where everyone is only acting out of external fears or things like that. We do need, even for social reasons, or the same thing for all midas, I think, at least because the law is not the only external thing that forces people, right? Honor, and you're going to be embarrassed, and other things. But it still doesn't cover enough. There's many human situations in which what stands between a bad society and a good society, like, people talk about high trust societies. I forgot the sociologist that invented that term. I forgot who. In the 70s, recent. There's a concept of high trust society and versus a low trust society. And the high trust societies and some of it's not like it's disconnected from the enforcement of laws and so on, but it's also really an educational thing. At least that's what Aristotle and Plato and all these people would say. It means that people are educated to act mostly in trustworthy ways.
I saw a study once where they say the high trustworthy societies are like the most the biggest Einstein. If you
because
you've never seen crime, you never see crime in
certain
those
kinds
societies
of crime
because you're constantly afraid of your life.
Certain kinds of
you
crime
steal,
for
you
your
die.
life, more like if you have to kill someone, you're probably already past the level of having a high trust society. But some things like people say things like this. Things like like in the United States, if you lie, I don't know what extent it works anymore. But it used to be like this thing that in America, like the taxes mostly run on the honor system. Like the IRS believes you when you tell them how much money you make, and they expect you to say the truth. Like maybe they don't, but that's the American ideal is something like this: that they expect you to say the truth, and because they expect you to say the truth, if they catch you lying, they can be really, really mad at you. Like in a different system. The European system, for the most part, if you go to Israel, you'll see they don't expect you to say the truth, and therefore they don't believe you for what you can't write anything on a tax return without a receipt, without like the state already knowing about it beforehand, because they're assuming that everyone is lying, and therefore when someone is caught with a lie, it's like, okay, we'll put you in jail for a month, whatever, move on. You understand? That's something like what you're describing. But in any case, what for my purpose, the important thing would be that high trust society, which is a useful society to live in, even begashmis, like it's not only like B'Dochne, it's only Olam Haba. For Olam Hazeh, it's also pretty useful. It cannot work only by people acting that way. People it has to create a certain kind of human being. So we need schools and education. Of course, culture educates, the TV educates you, and so on, right? Because there's the variety. I think this is one of the reasons, at least, because the variety of human situations is so varied that you can't rely on there's a form for everything. There's never going to be a form for everything. Therefore, if you rely on forms, there are always going to be people that find the loopholes. If you rely on people to have their judgment and to be more or less honest, decent people, you will end up with a lot more stable society, something that's a lot more reliable. In that way, this internal thing that we're looking for, this is why we don't call a person, like, for example, right, last week I talked about murder, right? Nobody would call someone, like, even the people that are all about, like, from Tzara Agra, and the bigger Tzara you have, the more of Shem you have, none of them would be friends with someone who goes around saying, really, I would be a murderer. I would kill everyone that cuts me off in traffic. They're just like, I'm scared because not even I'm scared. I recognize, we can do even a more internal version of that, right? I recognize that it would be bad for me, therefore I overcome my urges to murder everyone. Don't be that guy's friend, right? He's a bad guy. What do you mean he's a bad guy? He's a Yetzirah, he's a Shel Pitzra, he's a Tzaddik, he should get the most schar of everyone. Well, no. He's a bad guy because he's sick. A normal person, a good person, which means just a person that was well educated. It's not like this is natural. This is something that we've worked on since Hashem came in Har Sinai and said, we're working on getting people to not want to kill people. Because it's not enough to get people to recognize that they shouldn't kill people, or to kill everyone that kills other people and have them be scared of killing people. We need people to not want to kill people, because that's the only way that we get less murder in the long run. And that is why we say that it's not enough to be externally good, it needs to be internally good. This is like contrary to what you get, like that's why you're saying the other versions are different. Like contrary to what you get in Chassidus and in the more like Chavos and the more extremely internalist versions of ethics, where it seems that internalist ethics are antisocial. These are internalist ethics for the purpose of being social, because they're what they're about is still the social activity. They're not about. When I say I don't want to murder, what I don't mean I have a pure soul. Maybe it's true that it's a pure soul. That's a different discussion. That would be caring about a different criteria. But I don't care about my soul is pure. It doesn't want to murder anyone. And we could do this interpretation, but that would be a whole different class. What I care about is something like this guy is. We can pretty much rely on him to not murder anyone, unless it would be very important. Okay.
For the existentialists, the internal.
Okay, we're going to talk about the
existentialists. Went
existentialists.
against society,
Right, very good. We're going to talk about the existentialists now in a sec. Did we talk about that yet? Now, this is one thing. Another thing, which we have to distinguish, is another reason, and that's a more tricky reason. Now, a more tricky thing is to distinguish another reason, like that you were trying to mention, about why people value the internal, or something to do with will, volition, wanting, choosing, things like that. And that has to do with an interesting thought, which I don't know how much I can clarify it now. But people would say something, and this is like existentialists say, or some Hasidim say, Katzke Hasidim say, that something, right? We all agree to the basic assumption. The question is how it plays out. We all agree that something that is not about what come. Well, that's something. We all agree that an action or a habit that doesn't come from you doesn't count as a good human thing, right? This is really why we get into this whole discussion of will and choice and all of that, right? That's the first assumption that's agreed on, and the most simple level by everyone, right? If someone, let's say, was born is not entirely the correct thing, contrary to that.
Give an example once of being forced to do something.
If we're forced, that's for sure. That would be in one extreme example. Or if I could, or if it's something entirely natural. Let's say, I'm not sure about this. Let's say if something is entirely natural, something like someone who's beautiful, right? Someone who's just physically beautiful doesn't get a lot of moral credit for that. It's not a moral thing at all, right? It's if you can praise him, but you will just be praising God for creating beautiful people. You will be praising the person as a person. So this is agreed on. We agree that we need some ingredient, something in the vicinity of choice and will and so on, that makes what I am and what I do mine. What it makes it me as a human being. It makes me responsible for it. Otherwise, it doesn't have a moral value. It just might be good. I'm not saying it's bad. It's bad. Let's say it's not good to be beautiful and tall and all those nice things, but it's not good in the human sense, not good in the virtues, in the human virtue sense. It's good in a different sense. Now, there's really a question. There's really a question of what the human being is. What makes me most? And here you'll see two almost contrary opinions. Not a contrary opinions, one opinion and one correct knowledge. One is the thought that we discussed, for example, last time from Aristotle is that something is more about you. It belongs more to you. And this is maybe the question of it. This is what I said, that there's some kind of paradox here, right? Because we say that something that you do because you have that virtue, because you have that midah, is more about you than something you do because you chose it in the moment. Or because we don't even call that choice. It's something like spur of the moment, right? So, for example, if someone acts courage is a complicated thing because it has all these like emergency situations, which is something that makes it hard to think about. It's something like someone who has the, how do you call nedivut, being a person that gives, right?
Stingy and
what? Generous, yeah. Generous, right? Liberality, generosity, things like that. Someone who's correctly generous, we would understand that he is. If we're looking, right, you could be generous in all these ways. You could like be generous out of forcing yourself to give. You could be generous because, I don't know, I was in the mood, something like that. I gave you $1 million, for no reason, and the rest of tomorrow I don't, and we could be too generous also, but that's a different discussion. We say that the person who is stably generous, in other words, he is a generous person, is not only like doing generous things, that is more about him than the one who chooses it. And this is where there's like somewhat of a paradox, because we understand that, like the paradox here is the question that people often ask. We discussed here that if the goal of life is to be a good person, good people, we say sometimes, do the good things automatically, right? The Rambam's language is from these virtues follow good actions. They follow in like almost a necessary sense, not really necessary because it's a human being, not like a table, but it follows. It somehow comes out of that automatically. It's not something you have. There's no step in between That's important. There's no step in between having the virtue and the action. So like they have to choose it afterwards. Then people ask, okay, so then it turns out that those actions are less of you because they become automatic, so to speak. Right? Now, the true thought, or the opposite thought, which is Aristotle's thought, which is the Rambam's thought, is that it's not true. Why? Because what they are looking for is not something that is most determined by your will in the moment and could have been otherwise. That's not what they see as most human in us, as what mostly binds things, makes things ours. What they think is most human as us is the things that tell us about what we are. Now, in order to be something, you have to have a stable character. Someone who's like, when we say one day a malach, one day a galach, is not anything. So that person is not human at all, because he doesn't have any, what we call internal, like he doesn't have anything that we could say, this is him. But the person that has the stably good characters, or vice versa, is bad characters, that is the person who his actions followed mostly from what he is. And that is something very different from something, for example, that the existentialists, some of them, in extreme cases, are after. And also very different from what many people are after nowadays when they say, things need to be by a choice. This is, for example, right, the nafkamina, the very clear place where this will make a difference is in the value of things done because you have a good education. Someone who had a good education, which means that he was taught to like certain things. Like good education, of course, education works mostly by external, like it works by promising reward and punishment, it works by getting you to do things. We can't really get you to like something. You have to somehow see that for yourself. You do learn that from someone, but it's not like, it's very hard to like give that to someone automatically, easily. But it's still because of that education that you become a good person. And according, many people nowadays seem to think that is less about me. So I'm doing this because I was taught to do it. I'm doing this is not me because it's not my choice, right? And when they say it's not my choice, what they don't mean choice in the Aristotelian sense. They don't mean that I don't have we can say later, a considered opinion, a considered drive towards this, that I think this is the correct way to act, and I like it also, and therefore I choose to act it. That's not what I mean, because that's actually what their education gave you. If it's a good education, it's not only an external education, right? Education starts by the Shema, but it somehow gets you the Shema somehow, by some magic. It's a different discussion, right? We discussed this many times, if you went through certain systems, you get certain virtues. You don't only get, it's a very bad, I don't think it ever happens really. It would be a very weird education where you would stay at the level of reward and punishment. Like the moment the mashgiach leaves the room, you're left with nothing. That's not really how life works. You are always left with something. Slightly less than what you did for the reward and punishment, but you were left with something about yourself, right? Now of course, everyone agrees that when you're only acting for fear of punishment or for hope of reward, that you're not acting out of yourself. But I'm talking about the next step, right? Once I went to yeshiva and they got me to learn, I don't know, an hour a week, whatever, how long, right? They make you, when you're afraid, you learn 2 hours a day. But then when you're not afraid, you learn an hour a week. That's the amount of the middle day they got you they got into you, right? Now I'm showing you something very simple. And now people might think, I don't think anyone really thinks this, I think people don't think it through, but people sometimes would make the claim that, okay, the fact that you like to learn, that's just my conditioning, that's just my education, that's not me. What are the things that are you? When you jump into the pool in the middle of the night for no reason, when you're drunk, that's you. What is this you? What is this free choice that people are after all the time? The same like the Katz Chassidim who are looking. I'm pretty sure that they're not really confused, that we can interpret it in the correct way, but sometimes the people understand it this way. Like the person that we discussed many over here last time also, the Katzker Rebbe said that if you daven because you davened yesterday, that's not a good reason. And nobody really does that, right? We discussed that. But what I'm getting at is like, if we interpret that as you daven because you davened yesterday, in other words, because my education made me a person that davens once a week, once a day, whatever it is, that is not less me. It would be very weird. Like we have to think, what would be the other option? Like what is more me? It seems, and this is true, if you take this to the extreme, or you make it very clear, you'll see that there's this different version of what choice is, very different version of what will is, and there's has a history, and it has a reason why it came to be. And that is something like things that are done for no reason. Not because that's what I am, because that's a reason. Because what I am just means that the fullness of what I am sees this as a good thing and likes that. There's reasons in that. It's not like, you might not be able to articulate them, but that's a different problem. But there are reasons. And people seem to think that free will, and people think that that's what makes a human being human, mostly. Some kind of free will, like we said, free floating will. Something like, I can choose to be anything I want. And then if you're the person that you were taught to be, then you're not authentic. Remember the word authentic? Now, authenticity is actually a fake thing in this sense. Because authentic to what? What does it mean to be authentic? Remember authentic? There's fake people that are doing what their education told them, and there's real people who are doing what their education, opposite. Okay? And they're real to what? Like, authentic is like, right? Authentic watch is one that was really made by that watchmaker, and not the guy in Chinatown that made it. Okay? And what is an authentic person? How is it really the person? There needs to be some real person.
You.
Yeah, but who's this you? There needs to be an ideal you.
What you like.
Where is this like? What does that mean?
What you like to do.
Where did he get the like? The guy that's following his education also really likes the things. Again, unless you're talking about the really early stages of education where people are really just acting out of fear and hope for rewards and punishment. Or maybe there's some people that I really wonder about this. Like the Muslim have this like habit of attacking everyone for living in Yerushalayim. Is that true? Do you really think that I think not. I'm more positive about this. I have a friend that told me that he thinks that if you would convince the entire Lakewood that there's no Gehenna, they would all stop coming to shul.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true. I think they'll come less to shul, but they should come less anyway. Like they're coming too much. That would be a good thing. But I don't think they will stop.
If there's no Gehenna, then they wouldn't.
He told me, think the biggest tzaddik that you know, the Amshna Rebbe, you convince him there's no Gehenna, he becomes a good the next day. That's what my friend told me.
I think there'll be a lot more people than you think.
True.
I think so.
So I think there'll be more than you think. I'm taking the other bet. Let's try. I've actually seen it tried, and I've seen it played out. It's true that people stop doing certain things, but there's at some point there's
I know a perfect
processes of
person
these.
to ask, and I'm going to ask him.
Who?
Whatever.
He doesn't believe that already there's no Gehenna?
No. That
How you gonna-
if he would, whatever, it's fine.
My bet is I agree that there will be like a shack because there's other reasons, like for people, beliefs are very important to their personality and so on.
Yeah,
but
right.
okay, but that's a side problem. We're not that's a psychological
Well, that's
therapy.
the answer to the question.
No, but we're trying to get at something else. We're trying to get at, is it true that, like, the Muslims have this really funny, Muslim and Hasidim sometimes have this, like, really funny blame of everyone that's not them, and say that you're all acting for external reasons. None of you like what you're doing, right? You're all fakers, right? That's basic. Not fakers. You're all not authentic, right? You're all not. Now, I think my bet is because of this still understanding of education. I think that like I said, most people, that I've seen this play out actually in people personally, I have seen it playing out. It's true that they daven less, but they don't stop to daven, and that's fine. I think that most people, it would take away their reward and punishment, and they will mostly do the same thing that they've been doing before.
Why do you think that is?
Because the reward and punishment trained them to be that kind of people. Because of that. Because if you don't have that education, that's a different.
So now they are authentic?
Yeah. Because now they don't realize they're authentic because they keep on adding this Gehenna every day again. But if you take it away, it won't change much, or it would actually make things better, and make life much better.
It's so hard to wrap my head around.
You see what I'm saying? Because let's say, take my example of learning. That's a good example. You go to yeshiva, they tell you have to learn for 10 hours a day, and some people manage to do it by extreme reward and punishment, and like living in this like cult situation, and so on. Okay, then you leave the yeshiva, and now of course for the 2 weeks of Ben Zman you don't learn for 1 second because you got to get out all the steam from the system. Okay, but then after a few months pass, you won't be the same person that you were before. You will be the kind of person that needs to learn at least data number, like at least an hour a week. And how do I know? Because they're coming to my shir, these people. Like they're going to Dafayim, like the YouTube Dafayim Shir, I follow those people. They wouldn't have done it otherwise. There's many people that don't learn even an hour a year because they didn't have that reward and punishment ever applied to them. Mm-hmm. And the same thing for all the other mitzvahs. Now, would they do? Maybe details can be discussed, but I do think that. Therefore, I think that the Musar argument that says everyone is just Yerushalayim is a little weird. Yerushalayim in the sense that you don't really you don't really believe it, you don't really care for things that you're doing it for external reasons, right? For side reasons.
I don't know.
You don't agree with it. Let's try to experiment.
No, I'm not saying I don't know.
We're going to put a pill in Lakewood that takes away everyone's belief in Gehenna. Let's see what happens. people spend a lot of time telling themselves that this is what will happen. Maybe that's what itself should ask.
I don't know. Well, if what you're saying is true, maybe it's because they never believed it in the first place.
No, because the belief that I didn't say that.
Maybe they never believed that there was a Gehenna in the
No,
first place.
what I'm saying
So you're not
no.
really taking anything away.
Well, the
from
person who said you should do Al Tirka Vedam Shan Shan Sarab, it's not because he didn't believe in Gehenna, right? It's because that is still a reward and punishment. It's, okay, forget about more deeper meanings of all the Gehenna and stuff. It's because being a good person is its own reward, right? And of course, we cannot train you in that because you cannot see that before you start doing it.
You know what? Let's say take the other way around. Let's say there's no such thing as Gan Eden. How many people will go to shul?
Same thing.
I think it's different.
No, why? When I say Gan Eden, just scare your side. It's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's say it like this. First, let's say the truth. The truth is that even if there's no Gan Eden, it makes you it's better to go to shul. Okay, I don't know if you have to go to shul.
Fear is structure. Like people have a hard time doing things without structure. Let's say if I don't have a job to go to, I'm not going to get up in the morning, you know?
Okay,
so that's what the study was saying. The perfect society is the one that's constantly in fear.
No, but that's no. I don't think that's what the study was saying.
I think too much fear has diminishing returns, though. You know,
right? What I'd say, but that's not a problem. See, that's a different thing. You might say that is that structure a good thing by itself? Is the structure consist of maybe the question here is does the structure consist of these beliefs? I don't think it consists of these beliefs. I think that those beliefs reward, punishment, things like that. I don't think it consists of that. Even if you talk about a high trust society, forget about the religious things, right? The trustworthiness of the people doesn't consist of them knowing that the government will put them in jail for 30 years if they lie. That's what trains them to be that kind of people. That's what we're calling internality here, right? It's true that if the government would not have put anyone in jail, nobody would have gotten that training. Therefore, it's true that the society would become worse. Because rewards and punishments are trainings, they're chinuch. But it's not true that it consists of that. You know what I'm saying? In the same sense, you say it's a good structure to have, you have to have a share every day, you have to go to shul, that's a structure, and you only have that structure because of the beliefs that you're going to go to hell if you don't. Okay. But it's after there's those beliefs, create something besides themselves.
Should be saying forced habits create good habits.
Yeah. That's the basic theory of habituation here. Yeah. I don't know, where did I get to all of this?
It could be authentic though, no?
So what is authentic? Very good.
That's, if I have a job
I feel this is authentic.
Morning, and so that's it's something I want to do, but it's hard to do without a structure, you know what I'm saying?
It's hard to do well because you don't really believe in your job, and maybe you shouldn't, because there's nothing to believe, it's only a way to make money. That's really the question. I mean, there's some things that you shouldn't believe in. Why would someone believe in their job? That's a weird.
No, but let's say without the job, I think it's a good thing to get up early. But it's just if there's no one forcing me, laziness is going to get the better.
I'm somewhat skeptical of if it's a good thing to wake up early. You know, why is it good? What's so good about it? It's good because you got to get to your job. And other things
like that. To have a clearer head when you get up.
Oh, okay, that's a good reason.
I don't know.
No, I get it. I'm not disagreeing. I'm saying sometimes we say these kind of things I believe it's good to wake up early, but if you think about why it's good, what's wrong with waking up at 1 p.m.? Oh, because you're gonna miss. Okay, very good. Why then schedule everything at 1 anyways? Oh, because you got to coordinate with other people. Whatever. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes these things are not really good. But let's get back to what we're saying. So that's saying authenticity has to be authentic to something. To what is it authentic, right? If there's an idea of what is a real in my version that I was describing here, it doesn't really make sense to talk about authenticity. Only to the extent that again, the self-controlled person or the person that's forcing himself or that's training himself, it doesn't have any self. It doesn't, or his self doesn't match with his internal. Doesn't act. That's in some sense inauthentic.
Sometimes you're being forced to do things that you don't think have any benefit to you, and sometimes you are being forced to do things that you think are of benefit to you.
That's fine. benefit also can be like external benefit, where like I need money, and therefore I gotta go to my job, but I don't really care about that thing I'm doing. I care about its result. So it's like a side. The job, the work is a side thing to the thing that I care about, and it could be something that I do care about, like waking up. If you really care about being the kind of person that wakes up in a certain time and so on, right? So this is what we have to understand, that this is some versions, I think that some modern versions, some like existential versions of this like thing called authenticity. Of course, the existentialists have noticed that authenticity doesn't really make sense because by their version of it, and people like want to be what they are, like what they chose, and sometimes it's just defined by not what you told me. That's very babyish, like a teenager. Like I'm going to do everything my parents told me not, because that feels like I'm doing it. Okay, I get it. That's like that feeling I get, but it's not real because who's this you? In any case, that you is like is going to be the product of your education, or if you're educating yourself. Okay, so still, I think the version that says that what you choose most purely, most freely is most you, is a version that really, in some sense, doesn't believe or thinks that the most primary part of a person is some kind of like free ability to choose between options. And they don't really think that there's such a thing as a personality. Well, at least there might be such a thing as a personality, but what makes a human is mostly not his personality, not what kind of person he is, because that's just your nature. That's like, we ascribe that to education, we ascribe that to culture, we ascribe that to conditioning, things like that. So what makes a human and what like makes an act morally worth talking about, right, or humanly worth talking about, is some like very weird thing, something that, like I said, no, I don't think anyone ever experienced that thing, because that's not really how life works for the most part. But some kind of like free choosing of a life, or free choosing of a meaning, which means from possibilities, or even from possibilities maybe it's too limited, so from infinity. I think intuitively a lot of us think this way, because we're too intuitively taught to think about like choice as choosing between possibilities. And then we say like, well, I was given the education to be a certain kind of person. I was made into a certain kind of person by education, and therefore I don't really have options. I don't have optionality. I can't be a different kind of person. I could be a little here, a little there, and then like say, oh, so that's the little word. Like, I had a friend that makes Chassidish hats, and he told me he had a store, like a Chassidish hat store. He told me that in his store there's 375 different kinds of hats. And I was like, you and your store has only one kind of hat. And he explained, you have to understand that everyone wants to be very individual. But since you're only allowed to wear one kind of hat, if you're Chassidish Yid, so there's 370 variations, because there's like, it's combinatrix, right? There's like a little wider, a little thinner, a little taller this piece, a little bit bigger the ribbon, a little more high everything, and there's like, turns out that everyone knows exactly which of those 375 combinations they want, because that's what makes them special and different from other people. So that's like a very weird, like, how do we call it? Very weird consolation for the kind of person that says, like, and that's really all of life is that, like, just a very clear muscle for how the world is. Like, at the end of the day, we're all just choosing one of those 375 constellations of the ribbon size plus the brim size plus the height of the hat. Like, that's what choice is. Maybe you think that choice is something that you yourself made up, right? Something that I was mechadish. I originated. I'm original guy. I'm not a copy. I'm an original guy. Oh, you mean to say that you put that hat? I know. And that guy that has the hats, the never has to go to China to the factory and tell them to make like, and they realize that you need a microscope to know it's different. Like, it's normal person looks at it, it's the same hat. I don't know. No, if you live in that community, you notice all these like tiny differences. Okay, but it's fake. There's nothing so original about anyone. There's so many ways to be a human being. There isn't any original ways. The reason people think that this kind of originality is important is because they identify what's most human about a human is some like very tiny little thing, very like, which is supposed to be very free, which is like the choice of what you are. Choose what you want to be. Yeah, so, no, that's one. Some people end up with that. But if you think like me, that being a human means all of this, and then being authentic would just mean being authentic, not being forced, not acting only out of compulsion or out of fear, things like that. But it's not really correct to say that what you're educated into, for example, is not you. That is who you are. There isn't another you. There isn't like this chooser that it's abstract chooser that's besides for all of that. And therefore, for example, if I say that someone acts because of the kind of person he is, because of the kind of habits he is, whether he got it from education or they got it by educating himself, and I say that that's the person who lives out from choice, I'm not saying that after having the middle you still have choice. You don't still have choice. The choice consists of being that kind of person, and choice just means the recognition that this is good. We have to get more clear about this, like recognition, like why we call this choice. Like, is a preference? We call it a preference or a choice. There's something like where I think this is the correct way versus other ways. There's some choosing of that over others. Otherwise, it's not a choice. But it's not choosing to do this by this very abstract kind of choice. And this is why all of those things are not all of the kind of again. So this is why all of those like ideas of like doing what the opposite of what my parents taught me, don't make that more choice. And this is also why, going back on what I said in the beginning, this is also why wanting to do something is not what we're talking about. This internality is not something about like what I wish, what is in my head that I am. It's what you really are. It's what you really like. Okay, and we have to continue to this, but that's enough.